Are you curious what it would look like to go through burnout, leave your job, leave a relationship, leave your hometown, and be wild, free AF, and unfiltered? Well, I just recorded a great podcast episode for the Conscious Evolution podcast with Yolanda Russel. This is a very spicy interview. We talk about psychedelics and so much more. Definitely check out this interview. There's a little something for everyone. I think it's going to open your eyes to what it really means to be courageous. And it is not what you think. And give Yolanda a follow and stay tuned for her new season of her podcast, Unfiltered and Taboo. Can't wait. It's time to upgrade your life. Welcome to the Conscious Evolution podcast. I'm Dr. Andrea Pennington, Chief Psychedelic Officer for Innate Vitality. In this podcast and our live events and retreats, we explore ways to hack enlightenment by integrating ancient wisdom and modern neuroscience with transpersonal psychology. From plant medicine and psychedelics to breathwork, mindfulness, and neurofeedback, my guests and I will shine a light on the unique capacity that we have to use our conscious mind to evolve individually and collectively as a species. Tune in each week on your favorite podcast player or the Pennington Media YouTube channel for interviews and discussions about holistic healing of trauma and adverse childhood experiences, burnout recovery, and intentional wellness. Yolanda Russel, thank you so very much for joining me on this special edition of Conscious Evolution podcast.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here with you today.
Well, it's always fun for me to have a fellow podcaster on the show because you know the ropes, you know how this all works. And your story is something that I think a lot of people can relate to, especially coming from a healthcare background, being a former ICU nurse, and then making big moves in your life. I bet you hear this a lot. Do people tell you like, oh my God, you're so courageous. Like, you must be so brave to have made these big leaps, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And whenever anyone compliments me or says that they see something in me, my reminder is if you can spot it, then you've got it. And things that we love about ourselves, things that we don't love about ourselves are often reflected in other people. And that's just a big thing that I practice and preach. So yes, if you are listening to this and you find my story courageous, just know that that courage lives within you too.
I love that. Yeah, I love it. So talk to me a little bit about your burnout. We have so many things in common, but one of them is experiencing burnout. It ended up becoming an area of expertise in my medical practice and my psychological practice because it's so rampant. What was that like for you as a nurse?
Yeah, for me, I would say that there's this classic definition of burnout. And I had this picture in my head that it meant I was a bad nurse, that I didn't love what I did, that I was performing poorly in my job. And actually it was the opposite for me. So I was having all these feelings of, I like to say that my spirit just was becoming dull. And that's not something that you read in a textbook. That's not how burnout is explained. And so for me, it was, what's going on with me? What's wrong with me? Because I love what I do. I still show up fully for my patients. I am still recognized. My peers love me. What is this feeling? And the way that my burnout personally was manifesting was in a lot of self-sabotage. So it would be, oh, I have these 3 days off. Let me go drink bottles of wine with my friends. And, you really don't think of it that way. So it was this numbing. And then on the other end of it for me was there the credit card debt. I was just spending money just like crazy. And I didn't really understand or recognize that it was to fill some sort of void or, again, looking for this way to light myself back up. And obviously we know alcohol, spending a lot of money, reckless behavior is not the way that you replenish and nourish your soul at all.
So what did you do to actually get out of burnout? In my experience, it's always like a multifactorial thing. It's like Unfortunately, even as a medical professional, there's not one magic pill or one weekend getaway that's going to cure you from burnout. There's some internal shifts and changes that have to go along with it. How did you recover?
Yeah, majorly. I totally resonate with that. And like you said, I don't think that there's one thing that I did that was the thing that miraculously solved this. And like I said, for me, I didn't realize I was burned out. It was just this feeling of frustration, self-sabotage. And so when I started to kind of wake up, I like to think that the universe is always communicating with us. It's just about how receptive we are to listening to that. So I had been a cardiac telemetry nurse for about 3.5 years on a very intense, crazy floor where you're taking 6 to 7 patients and then sometimes being the charge nurse. And so I was burned out, not recognizing that. But what I did do in that period was I decided, hey, maybe it's time for me to move to a different unit and area of the hospital. And everyone always said, Yolanda, why don't you go and become an ICU nurse? Very detail oriented. So when you're someone that has 6 and 7 patients, you're trying to precept a nurse behind you, it is very hard to have that level of detail. And honestly, it's unrealistic. But when you're an overachiever, that's what you're trying to do. So literally, for me, it was I was digging my own grave in a way. But that was just who I am. So I leave that floor, go to the ICU, end up changing and thinking, hey, maybe if I start working night shift, that would be better for me. No, it was worse because I never slept. And then in the ICU was just this level of, wow, everyone around me is dying. And I'm taking care of a machine and my patients aren't always getting up and walking out of this place. And it was just really it was just different. And so there was a night in 2016 where I was taking care of a patient that was in stage of AIDS, had hepatitis C, and doing very routine care on this patient. And when we went to go turn them, I was exposed with their bodily fluids. And talk about your life flashing in front of your eyes, because this wasn't a situation of, oh, let's test this patient to see what kind of diseases they have. This patient was known. And my hospital just totally dropped the ball with how they dealt with that. And again, I kept just showing up. I'm a nurse. This is what I do. And then another way that I thought would remedy this, how I was feeling, was let me go and take a travel assignment. Let me leave everything that I know and see if this is going to work for me. And took a travel assignment. And there was just this one day towards the end of 13 weeks where I had 2 really tough patients. And I went in a bathroom, and this was the light for me. This was you have got to do something, because I broke down in the bathroom. And in that moment, for the 4 hours, I had 4 hours left on that shift. And I had this really crystal clear thought of, I don't care. And that was the first time. And it was so loud. And I listened to it. And I called my mom. I called my boyfriend at the time. And I said, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I cannot do this anymore. And when this contract is up, I am going to take a month off. And I took a month off, and my month became 2, became 3. My recruiter was calling, hey, when are you going to come back? And I said, I'll call you. And this year in October, to be 6 years since I've touched a patient.
Wow. Well, good for you for hearing that voice and heeding the call to not go back. And, that final feeling of, I just don't care, that is the hallmark of true burnout, where, you had all the signs, like you were still showing up, you were going that extra mile, you were putting in the hours. And then when we get to that point where we lose that empathetic connection, it's one of the hallmarks of burnout. But you also, your story also is very reminiscent of the people who think that if I try a new environment, like, oh, maybe it was that toxic environment, and they go to another place and they get into the honeymoon period, it feels okay for a while, but then there's something, and that something is us. Like, we can change all of the outside circumstances, but if we are the one thing that remains constant, that's where we have to say, what is it in me that is leading me to burnout? And one of the things you described is being an overachiever.
Yeah. And for me too, on the outside of it now, right? When you're just in it and it's just swirling and you're in this vortex of life almost, where it's just literally sucking you up. What I now know and can be very reflective about was, again, what you just said, what in me needs to change? What in me needed to say no when my supervisor was calling, hey, we don't have staff? It was always the nurse that they would count on to come in. So there was a lot that I needed to take credit for, but being in the thick of it, everything was happening to me. Oh, I got exposed to this patient with these communicable diseases. That was something that happened to me. Now, the way that I look at that is, wow, it happened for me. It's listening to those gut feelings, trusting intuition. And when you really tap in, I do believe that there's something that's very profound that speaks to us, and listening to that and trusting it. And I'm not perfect. I still have moments where I don't listen to that. And then there's always those little taps of, hey, I'm here. Are you listening?
Yeah, it's better if we listen to the little taps instead of the big smackdown, right?
Oh my gosh, yes, because they are usually very huge.
Yeah. So I wonder if you really think that you were courageous to leave nursing.
Oh, that is a very good question.
The reason I ask is because for me, when I left the traditional practice of medicine, left the United States, moved to the south of France with my then 4-year-old daughter, a lot of people said I was so courageous and so brave. And I was like, no, I was miserable where I was. This was an act of life. I didn't feel like courage. It felt like it's do or die. I needed to be in the best, healthiest space and mind space possible to be a good mother. And here in France is where I felt that. So that's what I'm asking. Like, when you hit burnout and you're realizing, like, no, I'm not doing this again, it doesn't feel like courage. It feels like self-preservation.
Absolutely. It feels like honoring yourself and trusting yourself. And so when people come to me and they talk about being burned out or how miserable they are in nursing, I don't give them advice anymore, because really it has to be about you finding your rock bottom. All of our rock bottoms look so differently. My rock bottom, had I chosen, could have been in the ICU when I was exposed to that patient's diseases, but it wasn't. It took me really getting to that point of, like, I am completely detached. I don't care, that I got to it. And I believe that one of the hardest things that we'll ever do in our lives, while also being the most important, is learning to trust ourselves. And many of us don't walk around to trust ourselves. So for me, I've done a lot of things that are very unconventional. So when a nurse comes to me and they've been on travel assignments for the last 2 years of COVID, and they have over $100,000 saved in their bank account, but they're still miserable and they're not ready to walk away, I just say, hey, well, maybe you're not at your bottom. Because at my bottom, was I willing to drain my 401k? Was I willing to go in my closet on days where my bank account was in the red and say, what am I going to sell that, was once of value, that didn't matter, that I'm going to put on Marketplace to be able to pay whatever it was that I needed to pay for? And again, all of our bottoms look so differently, and what we're willing and choose to sacrifice is also very different. And I think it's very individualistic of when you decide, I'm going to honor myself. And that looks different for all of us.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, that's kind of lovely to say, look, maybe you're not even at your rock bottom yet. So I'm not going to even give you advice. So you've all been exploring psychedelics in the last year or so. What's that all about? What led you into, what was your first psychedelic substance? How did you get introduced?
Wow. So I know where it started. So I had left nursing. I actually, when I was at this period of, I'm trying to figure out how I can generate income for myself. I had ended up in a multi-level marketing company when I still was a nurse. It was a health and wellness company. And I got to a point of, I'm questioning it. There was this little voice that was, this really isn't your own business. So that's kind of how you're brainwashed into it. And I knew that when people were coming to me, that it wasn't this product that they were buying. Essentially, they were buying my energy. They wanted to be in my energy. And I talked a lot about nursing, and I talked a lot about burnout. And I had done a really great job on social media of learning how to brand myself, because again, I had figured out people aren't buying the shake. Everyone is selling the same product. They're buying me. It's the difference in me, the way that I show up. And so I ended up hiring a couple of business mentors, and being around these people that were making millions of dollars. What I understood was they were very open-minded, and they were if they were willing to share what had worked for them in these experiences, there was this common thing of psychedelics. It just kept coming up. And so I'm thinking, here I am as a nurse where we're really trained and programmed. I never did anything that was, quote, illegal as a nurse. Though, we look at the drinking that people do and we don't even second guess it. So I just started to kind of curious mind, started to research and wanted to know about psychedelics. And at the time, my partner was 14 years older than I am, and he had children that had experience with psychedelics. And I kind of just was like this, maybe a little bit irresponsible, but hey, if it ever comes a time, should you land on some mushrooms, I would be really open to going on that journey. And so I said it as a very nonchalant thing. And then about a month or two later, I had what I needed, or what it was that I was desiring. And I feel like the medicine will call you when it's your time. And yeah, so my first experience was with psilocybin. I am a huge advocate, if you will, of those in healthcare. Really, honestly, I think in a medical setting that these medicines can be really powerful and transformative, because what I believe is not talked about often enough is the level of trauma that we have faced, one that's generational and just innate and within us that needs to be healed. And then two, everything that we've grown up and seen and experienced, and then what healthcare actually does to us in a traumatic way. I just don't think that that's talked about enough.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Well, you have seen in the Pacific Northwest that they're using psilocybin on frontline burnout healthcare workers. There's a study. I don't remember if it's Washington State or Oregon. But yeah, now there are healthcare professionals in burnout who are experiencing psilocybin and seeing what it can do to exactly what happened to you. Like you and I got it hard way, hitting rock bottom and realizing, what the F am I doing? I've got to live differently. So I find that psychedelics used responsibly can really help to open our eyes. So, okay, so you're hands on some magic rooms. Did you journey by yourself? Were you in a group? What was the set and setting? Like, what was that like?
Yeah, so I had done so much research and I understood I shouldn't do these alone, but I am very not a loner. It's the weirdest thing. People see my energy and I'm very like, woo, but also very into myself. And so I knew that I wanted to be home when I did them. And I knew that I didn't want necessarily somebody with me, but to know that there was someone in the house. And my partner was home, and there was just a random Saturday that, hey, I'm going to do this. And I did my research. How do you prepare them? And accidentally, I lemon teaked teched the very first time that I did. So really just blasted myself off. And I remember having all this anxiousness as I was in the bed, and my little dog Ralphie was right here, which you all can't see him, but he's literally right on a chair next to me. And I closed my eyes, and all of a sudden I'm someone that has a very hard time visualizing or bringing images into mind's eye. And I closed my eyes and I was like, whoa, I can see this red behind here. And that's not something that I'm ever typically used to seeing. And I had a journal, and I was journaling. I was time stamping of, okay, I just ingested the medicine and now I'm closing my eyes and I'm feeling kind of anxious. And then, when you're in a full kind of mushroom journey, and I started at, I think it was recommended, the research that I done was to start at 0.7, but I was just going to I'm going to go with this 1 gram. That's just where I'm going to start. I know I'm in a safe environment. I know that someone's here for me. And, once I was blasted off, like trying to write on mushrooms is always a really interesting thing for me. It does not happen. Though I have gotten in further journeys, have I actually recorded myself. And that's actually something that's been interesting too. But yeah, I was just on the ride, and I got to this point of standing in the room, and I was laughing and just so joyous, but there were just streams of tears coming out of my eyes. And it was just this really interesting thing of, I don't feel sad, but these tears just needed to escape. And every mushroom journey, it's the best cries that I have, whether it is something very emotional that I'm going through, or if it's just these unprocessed tears that have been living with me for the last 37 years that have needed to be expressed. And then I did something which I don't recommend if you're listening to this. I did something that I had this real pull into nature, and I wanted to be in nature, which again, that's kind of just the mushrooms wanting us to connect. But I had my fiance at the time drive me to this place, and it just was not a good thing for me. I was just like really anxious in the car. I was super nauseated. But when we finally did get to this place in nature, all you could see was trees. And I just remember the trees just like breathing with me and being in sync. And I can still go back to that moment. It still brings so much emotion, and I could just cry. And I remember when I was coming down from the mushrooms, almost being sad of, wow, that was just so beautiful and it was so amazing. But what you take away from each of these experiences is I can invoke that beauty and that magic within myself anytime that I choose to. But I do believe where psychedelics help is that once you unlock it and you can see just what is always here, it's always around us. We just have to be more present to choose to experience it.
That's awesome. Absolutely. I'm a big crier in all ceremonies, magic mushrooms and ayahuasca. Yeah, I cry. Well, it's beautiful that your first experience with 1 gram was positive, except for the little drive and a little bit of the anxiety. What, besides that connection to knowing how to like reconnect to that sense of beauty and love of nature and that, what else did you get from that first experience? Have you integrated anything else that has changed your life as a result?
Yeah, I think mushrooms also have this way of just blowing your heart open if you allow it. So I too believe that where I'm this person and I legitimately just got it tattooed, there are words that I say that I'm real raw and free AF. And what I believe that they also have helped me do is just to be more vulnerable and to be seen by other people in a way that, again, is sometimes very uncomfortable. And to also live my truth, to understand that where I am in my life and who I am as a person is never too much. But it is about connecting and finding the right people that, one, give you the space to be yourself, and two, encourage you and challenge you to continue to rise into yourself. I think that that's what life is this constant journey of peeling back all the layers and the conditioning and the trauma to who is this person? Who am I? And there have been some other substances that I've since been able to incorporate and go on journeys with that have really helped me uncover that. But it is, to me, it's a lifelong kind of experience of showing your true self most authentically and most magically, honestly.
Well said. Showing up with authenticity and a little bit of magic along the way. I love it. Are you open to sharing these other substances that you're incorporating into your life?
Yeah, absolutely. So it was the mushrooms kind of just opened my mind in a way. And for me, I was also really hesitant to experiment with anything while I had been doing research and being really curious while I had my nursing license. Because I always thought, even though I'm not practicing, maybe someone would report this to the board because I've just shared a lot. And so in September of 2020, I guess, wow, it's been that long. I let go my nursing license. I decided, hey, I'm going to inactivate this. I'm going to do this on my terms. I am, quote, like Tony Robbins would say, in a sense, burning the boat, even though I could go back to it if I wanted to. But I did. I got rid of my license. And then that was when I really started to open up about being on these psychedelic journeys with the experience. So I do believe that there are a lot of healthcare workers that experiment with many things, but they cannot be open about it. So again, just coming at this as hey, I've been there, done that. So the next the next medicine that I journeyed with was MDMA. So Molly, as it's often commonly called. I've also experimented with MDA, which enjoy both of those substances. And then I have also experimented with LSD. I have experimented with combo, which isn't necessarily a psychedelic, but it is a plant medicine which has a lot of healing properties. And when I experimented with combo, did I also have an experience with bufo or 5-MeO DMT. And what I've learned, and I did all of that, it was kind of, I just blew open the psychedelic closet very quickly, is tread lightly, because these medicines will take you where you need to go. You have to trust them. And when we are fighting them or not surrendering fully into the experience, that it can be not the most pleasant, or quote, having a bad trip, which I don't believe anything that I've ever done has been a bad trip. However, when I look at setting, was I in the best mindset, the best headspace, that is really something that we have to be mindful of and take into deep consideration.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely agree with you on the headspace is an important one for us to think about. We interviewed Charlotte James, the co-founder of the Ancestor Project, and Dre Wright, the other co-founder of the Ancestor Project, and they sit in ceremony with sacred earth medicine from the frog, combo, and they also serve rapé. And, it was really wonderful talking to Charlotte, because she expressed how, we can still enjoy psychedelics in this social and celebratory fashion, whether that's at a rave or a Burning Man or some other festival. But you can still set your intention. You can still have your own headspace going into that a little bit more than what we would have done in the past. So, okay. All right. So magic mushrooms, MDMA, MDA, 5-MeO or bufo, and combo. Have you sat with the grandmother, ayahuasca, yet?
I have not. She has not called me yet. And
Okay.
that is actually where I started. I was hearing people talk about ayahuasca, and I really do actually think that was the opener for me. But as people would share those experiences, I was like, wow. And at the time, I was very plant-based, and I had stopped drinking alcohol. And I'm really curious what it would have been like for me to experience any of these substances and that kind of energetic space that I was in, because that's really where I was feeling lots of presence. I was hearing things. So I was very much deep into a spiritual awakening at the time, but that's not when I started psychedelics. Geez, who knows? I'd probably really be floating off into space if I had done ayahuasca at that time. But yeah, grandmother has not called me. And for me, it's been this, I almost had this stair step of how I look at psychedelic experiences, where grandmother to me seems like just, because that's a very long journey, where some people would say bufo or 5-MeO might be like their top tier experience that they're willing to go to. But yeah, she just seems like she could be a little rough sometimes. And I just don't know if I'm ready for her.
Yeah. Well, it's just, if I were to kind of classify it rough in your terms, like bufo or 5-MeO, because the stuff, the complete association leaving the planet that that can be so mind shattering. It shatters, people often describe it as shattering every conception that they had of themselves, of the universe. So that could be considered rough, even though it's not physiologically as rough as, say, ayahuasca is, or combo for that matter. Like ayahuasca, yes, there's nausea, the vomiting, the purging from multiple orifices. And of course, it's hallucinogenic. So who knows, what kind of imagery you might see or might revisit past images. But combo, I haven't yet experienced combo. Both Charlotte and Dre, invited me to sit in ceremony. But what was that like for you? Because number one, it's not the traditional psychedelic, so you're not seeing visions, but you're definitely going through a physiologic purge and emotional. But what was it like for you, and where did you do it?
Yeah, so my experience was a bufo experience. So we did the combo to purge in preparation for the bufo journey. And at the time, this was in November of last year. So November 2021, I was coming out of a 6-year relationship, breaking an engagement off, moving on my own for the first time. So life was just, there was a lot going on. And I went into that experience of show me what needs to be closed and show me what I need to open up to. And the combo experience, it was very ceremonial. I did it here in Austin, Texas, but there was a shamana that came in that she set with so many medicines. This woman is just absolutely amazing. And we were very prepared. So it was having the sacred tobacco. Then she gave us the rape or hape. And it was a lot of discomfort, really. But being able to say thank you in the discomfort, to have that gratitude in the experience of being so uncomfortable in your body, because the first time that was the first time I'd ever done hape, and it's just, it makes you tear and you're crying. And now that's something that I actually use I used to use it every day, but I don't use it that way anymore. It's more of just, hey, when do I need to sit down and feel super grounded? Because it does have a way of just like really like, boom, here we are. And so the combo, the whole being burned and then having the poison put into you is, that in itself is just the whole mindset thing of, again, how do I find gratitude into this? And you're chugging water. And I just remember sitting there, I'm really petite, and I had really hydrated myself the day before. And everyone was, your body just starts to feel like really hot, like your ears are ringing. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is the most uncomfortable, but you're saying thank you. And then all of a sudden, does the purge just start? I was the first one to purge, the smallest one, and probably purged the most, to be quite honest. And, just this reminder of, I'm getting rid of so much that isn't even mine. And how courageous, if we want to call that, is it to be sitting in something like this of, I'm doing the work and it's so heavy and so deep. And so we get through that experience and you're completely just like, but finding this gratitude in it, and then sitting with Bufo. So that's freebasing the Bufo. And in my personal experience, I don't remember my Bufo journey. I remember being served the medicine. I remember closing my eyes, laying back, and that's actually it. And there's a point within my Bufo journey, which everyone that was there and around me described. I do remember this one distinct experience where I felt like I was going to purge again for some reason. And so everyone that was around me set me up really quickly. It was like a spit of a purge. But then all of a sudden, did I let out this guttural, primal, just scream. And somebody was like, whoa, Yolanda found her voice. And the last that I really remember was kind of like coming out of it. But when I woke up, I thought that I had died. I literally thought that I had died. And what the shamana said is that when people don't really remember their experiences, is that they were the ones that went truly deep, and that maybe what was saw or what I experienced was not for me to see or to recall. So I had to sit with that in the weeks after Bufo. Of one of my friends had the cosmic orgasm, and it was just like this beautiful experience with her. And for me, I can't say that it was this beautiful thing, but I got what I needed from it, and just have to trust that whatever I experienced was exactly what I needed and had the healing that I needed to go with it. And so coming out of that experience, what I will say is that my psychedelic exploration has significantly decreased, because I just feel, wow, I'm still integrating all the time from these experiences, even from the first one last March.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because I do find that there are a lot of us that find like, okay, well, now that this gateway has been opened, maybe I should try this, and I should go sit here, or I should go to the jungle there, and not having that time to integrate. Because you will find things, even if you don't remember what happened in it, there are going to be some integrations in your psyche. Wow, yeah, that's good. So what is your practice now? I'm following you on Instagram, so I see a lot of you sharing what's going on in your life and journaling and stuff. But what is your practice that you maintain for your own well-being, whether it's to integrate psychedelic experiences, but now that you're on this new journey, this new path? Tell me about that.
Yeah, so I struggle with routine. I consider myself to be this super free spirit and kind of wake up and what feels good today? This is what I ask myself. And I do think that that is important, is to honor what feels good in your soul and that can look different day to day. But at a minimum, I have a 5-minute journal. So I do try to wake up in that gratitude and what will make today a great day with things that I have absolute control over, because there's so much of life that we don't have control over. And always, I think maybe if you have children, I don't have children. I'm a very child-free woman. I'm 37 years old. Don't really see that in my cards. But my dog, just always in the moments that we're walking and we're together, just how grateful am I for this little thing that just loves me so unconditionally, teaches me so many lessons day to day. And there are times where I'll find myself rushing through things like taking his walk, and I look at him and I just apologize of, this is your time. I'm so sorry. You are one of my best teachers. So that little, those little moments of how can we cultivate love and gratitude and thankfulness into, when I start to feel really off or like I'm not in a ritual or ceremony with myself, that's often when I'll sit with rape or hape and just bring myself back in. And I think just self-acceptance of the days when I do feel off of a routine of, it's okay, it's not the end of the world. You get to get back to that. And I do like to write. I love words, whether they're written or spoken. I love to just sit down and sometimes just ask myself, like, what needs to come out? And there are days where I know exactly what needs to come out. And there are days where it's just this is how I'm feeling. And those feelings can be ugly and they're allowed to be ugly some days. And then always making sure that I'm ending on a positive. And that's really where the 5-minute journal is so great, because it has this nighttime prompt of what went great today and what did I learn today, and falling asleep with that versus, oh my gosh, I forgot to wake up and do this, that, and the other tomorrow. It's just these little practices. And for anyone that's listening, I think that it can be really easy to watch people online and influencers of suggesting their routines, but really finding and taking what works for you and leaving what doesn't work for you.
Awesome. Yes. Well, I encourage everyone to follow Unfiltered and Taboo online and on Instagram at Yolanda Russel. So talk to me about Unfiltered and Taboo. What's coming up with this new season of your podcast?
Yeah, so I started a podcast, I think it's almost been 3 years ago, and it was called Real, Raw, and Free, because those are just words I've lived by for the last 5-6 years. And I've always just wanted to talk about things that people don't want to talk about or are a little bit taboo. And I believe that when we can start having really open conversations about things that society has deemed as, we shouldn't talk about that, for the person that's open-minded or curious, or even a closed-minded person, really giving people the opportunity to say, I never thought about that way. Or looking at things and how can, as humans, I think it is within our nature to pass judgment. It's within our nature to find things that look different, but to find those things and just be curious about them. So, and on the podcast, my goal is to talk about relationships. I have so many people that are in the lifestyle or are polyamorous. And that being something for me of like, I don't know if that's for me or something that I would choose, but wow, am I so curious about it? So bringing out these topics, and what I often do is just gauge my audience on Instagram. What are things that you're curious about or that you want to talk about, but you don't think that we should? Because I am more than willing and open. I have no license binding me. I'm like a freelancer really at this point. I have nothing that binds me into this. I can't say what I want to say, or I cannot talk about what I choose to talk about. And that is just a space of life that I don't think many of us get to be in or trust ourselves enough to explore. And that's always where I'm personally pushing my own envelope. And I believe that in doing that and sharing that really openly and freely, it gives other people permission to do the same.
100%. Well, I can't wait to listen Unfiltered and Taboo, and just to see if I get shocked by anything.
Well, yeah, and I think it's too where, you having the background that you do and talking about these things, when we can see people that are maybe that we hold at a higher regard for speaking about these things. Again, for me, it was just the millionaires that were talking about these psychedelic experiences and mushrooms. I'm like, what? You do that? You do drugs, Yeah. And I've stopped using that word, the D word. I don't call drugs because they are profound tools when used correctly. Can we use them and go out and rave? Absolutely. Sometimes I have to set the intention with mushrooms. Hey, we're just going to go out and have fun tonight on a real light dose where I'm just giddy and giggly enough and don't want to lay in my bed and have this whole reflection of life kind of process. So I really do. My friends laugh, but I call them tools. We don't call them drugs. They are tools that, again, can expand you, can take you into yourself, and most importantly, can really help you show up in the world as a different person when used appropriately.
Yeah. Well, here's to more real, raw, free AF, Unfiltered, and Taboo, the new season of the podcast by Yolanda Russel. Check it out. Follow her online. Thank you so much for sharing. Thank you for sharing your story and your voice. I'm really grateful because one, we do need more healthcare providers. If not what's available to them, at least what they might be seeing their patients getting into. And two, I think in the BIPOC community, we need more of us to share what we've experienced, the good and the bad. I'm not out here pushing psychedelics for everyone. I think that there's certainly some people where I would say away from certain of these medicines. But by at least being visible and vocal, now more of us can at least get into these conversations. So I thank you for that.
Yes, because honestly, I feel like we probably need it the most and often are the most hesitant to go into it. So
yeah, for all of the reasons. I mean, the war on drugs was targeting, Black and lower socioeconomic folks. And we are the ones that need these healing medicines that our ancestors have used for thousands of years. So it's partly reclaiming our right to these medicines. And that's why this series is here. Thank you, my friend.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's been a joy. And hey, we'll keep in touch. And the next round, when you do the call, if Grandmother Ayahuasca calls you, I hope that you will come back and share your experience with me.
Absolutely. And I can't wait to have you on the podcast too.
Yay. Thank you. Until next time, be well.
See ya.
Thank you for tuning in to the Conscious Evolution Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend, subscribe, and leave us a review and rating on your favorite podcast player. This helps us get the content out to a larger audience. And to watch the video version of the podcast, visit the Pennington Media YouTube channel. Want more info on how psychedelics may improve your mental well-being, how to choose a retreat, or what to look for in a shaman? Get on the Psychedelic Curious email journal. The link is in the show notes and on my website, andreapennington.com. You can also sign up for my free masterclass series, where each month I take a deep dive into a topic in holistic healing, trauma recovery, self-love, resilience, and psychedelic-assisted therapy.